the a-hole for telling my transgender child I need more time to process? I, a 58-year-old male, have a child, female to male, 17, who is transgender. My child uses he/him pronouns at school and around friends, and also goes by a preferred name at school. My wife and I signed off on anything related to school and refer to my child with the preferred name and pronouns around teachers and friends. We are also in the process of hiring a college counselor and introduce my child with the preferred name and pronouns to said counselor, since that's what will be going on the college application. Last night, my child asked me to talk about why I or my wife haven't used the preferred name and pronouns at home, despite it being 5 years since my child came out. My child seemed laid back and steady the entire conversation, but also seemed to be frustrated throughout parts, particularly at my answers. The truth is, as I told my child, I need a little more time. I've called my child one thing for 17 years. It's not easy to just switch at the press of a button. My child also pointed out that some friends who are transgender have much more flexible parents when it comes to all this, but I feel like my wife and I have been doing a good job. We got stuff set up with the school. We refer to my child in the preferred way around friends. I don't understand why my child is upset. I haven't used their legal name in years, but apparently that's not enough. In my defense, my child has never formally asked me or my wife to use the preferred name or pronouns at home. I asked my child about this, and the response was that it's not something I should have to ask you. It's something you just do. I feel like my feelings aren't being considered here. It's not an easy change. I told my child that I was sorry things weren't moving as fast as my child might like, but that I need time to process. We ended the conversation there on what I thought was a positive note, but my child has been giving me the silent treatment since they woke up this morning. I've told my wife that we should all have a discussion this weekend, but I'm worried it won't have the outcome my child wants. I'm very grateful that my child has been so patient, but I feel like some things might be said that my child will regret, and I'm worried for how that might impact our relationship. Apologies for the ramble. I don't have a lot of experience in this and was hoping for some thoughts from people in a similar situation or know people in a similar situation. Am I the a-hole? Well, you guys, since the original post, there have actually been 2 edits from the father, and I'll go ahead with those. Edit number 1. I've seen a lot of rage bait comments, and I can assure you I am not nearly that talented of a writer to come up with this story on my own. This is a real person's story, and I appreciate seeing all the advice that I've received. My family is having a discussion this weekend, and I don't know how updates work on this subreddit, but I might post an update afterwards if people are interested. Edit number 2. I did not expect this post to gain so much attention. I appreciate all the helpful advice and DMs I received. Replying to comments is a bit overwhelming, but I assure you I've read as many as I can. Dear Dad, you're grappling with something that's extremely challenging, to say the least. I've been working on a response for nearly a week now, and it was challenging for me even because of all the rage-baiting comments that I read under your post. Your situation, it's about love. It's about change, confusion, and ultimately growth. Now your daughter, let's call her Emma for now. Emma has to realize that you were born in the 60s, during a time in which this type of change was unheard of. Yeah, Emma, it's going to take your dad some time to wrap his brain around you becoming his son. Dad, You said Emma came to you 5 years ago, which would make her 12 years old at the time. A 12-year-old is still in elementary school. 7th grade to be exact. The 12-year-old girl is going through puberty, growing boobs, but probably hasn't even experienced her first period yet. Still, she wants you to know at that tender age that she identifies as male and prefers to be referred to by male pronouns. For most parents, hearing your child is questioning their gender, it can be shocking, but for you, this revelation set off a chain of emotions. I'm willing to bet that at the age of 12 years old, you thought Emma was just going through a phase. But now 5 years have passed since that initial conversation, and your journey is far from over. It's understanding that you still be struggling to fully accept and embrace your daughter's transition. People have to understand where you're coming from, the hurdles that you have to face, and the emotional journey that parents of transgender children experience, even when they really want to be supportive. I try to imagine myself in your shoes. One day you have a conversation with your daughter, who up to that moment you've known as your little girl. She's been growing up, dealing with the usual challenges of adolescence, and then one day out of the blue, she tells you something that doesn't fit into the world you thought you understood. Like many parents, you didn't know much about gender identity or the struggles that transgender people face. This is the case for many people who haven't had to confront this type of issue personally. Your world, your understanding of gender, it was already binary, I'm pretty sure. Male and female only. So when Emma told you she identified as a male, I imagine your initial reaction was probably confusion, uncertainty, and hell, even fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what this might mean for her future. Fear of how others would treat her. And fear of how the relationship with your daughter might change. How do you carry out your duties as a father and continue to protect your daughter? It gets conflicted. But at that moment, should you even have accepted what she was saying? Was she too young to know? I don't know. Was it just a phase? These questions and doubts, they had to cloud your thoughts. And that's not uncommon for parents to feel overwhelmed by the barrage of emotions that you needed to process. When trying to imagine myself in your situation, I thought I'd start off by trying to understand, by educating myself about transgender issues, reading books, or maybe speaking to close friends and professionals. I would want to be a good parent, like you. A good support system for my child. But even with all this new information, something still didn't feel right. For me, that is. But I believe for you as well. I'm sure your beliefs and values, the ones you've held for more than 50 years, were in direct conflict with what your daughter was telling you. You were raised in a time and culture that treated gender as a fixed concept, something defined by biology and never up for debate. The idea that someone could change gender or choose gender was, well, it was something you just didn't understand. But then there was fear. Fear of the unknown. A subconscious fear that things would never be the same. That bond that you share with your daughter, the way you saw her as your daughter, would somehow be lost. I know you love your daughter with all your heart, but the fatherly image that you always held for her as your little girl was being replaced by something unfamiliar. This tension undoubtedly created a gap between the father you were and the father that you're expected to be now. The fact of the matter is, you now have to grieve the loss of your daughter, even though your child is still very much alive. There's no time limit on grief, especially when it's your child. Emma believes that 5 years is more than enough time, and I couldn't disagree with her more. One very important point stood out with me, and that's that you didn't reject Emma outright. You didn't say, I don't believe you, or I won't accept that. In fact, you tried in your own way to support her. But here's where the struggle becomes more complicated. Your resistance wasn't something explicit. It wasn't in the words that you used, but in your actions and those subtle behaviors. Emma asked you to use male pronouns, he, him, and I noticed in your post you used the pronoun they, and called her by a male name. But every time you did, it probably felt like a betrayal to a part of your heart that still saw her as your daughter, your little girl. You might have even caught yourself slipping up and using the wrong pronouns or words, hesitating before saying her new name inside your home. The internal battle of wanting to honor your daughter's wishes but being unable to fully embrace them, it can feel isolating. Emma might have noticed the discomfort in your voice or those long pauses when you try to use her correct pronouns. But for a transgender person, that can be painful. It feels like their identity is not being validated, and it can lead to feelings of rejection or alienation. At the same time, you've probably been living with a sense of guilt. You know Emma's counting on you. She's trusting you to be part of her journey and to accept her for who she is. But you feel that your failure to fully accept her is damaging the relationship. Every time you make a mistake or fail to be fully supportive in your daughter's eyes, it adds to your internal conflict. Guilt is a natural reaction when you feel you've let someone that you love down, especially if you don't mean to. But the good news is guilt accompanies change. The critical part is that your guilt stems from a father's love for his daughter. It shows how much you really care about her. The struggle's not coming from a lack of love, but from an internal confusion. It's about wanting to support her while trying to navigate a new world that feels foreign and intimidating. And this is where a lot of parents find themselves torn between the old and the new. It's not an easy thing to navigate, and it doesn't happen overnight. But here's more good news. Change is happening, even if it's slow. Little by little, you're coming to understand that the love for your daughter, it isn't bound by the limitations of traditional gender roles. You're realizing that gender is a fluid, personal experience and that your daughter's happiness and her sense of self should always come first. Understand that being a supportive father, it isn't about fully understanding everything all at once. It's about loving and accepting Emma where she is and where she's going. It's about meeting her with open arms and letting go of those expectations you had for her. To all parents out there who may be in a similar position, I want to say this. It's okay to struggle with this. It's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to feel overwhelmed and to even feel fear. It's a normal part of the process. And supporting a transgender child, it isn't about perfection. It's about trying, learning, and evolving together. Dad, you're definitely not the a-hole for taking all the time you need to process your feelings. It's a long road. And it's not easy. Not for you, and certainly not for your daughter. But as we see in your story, love can still be the guiding force even when the path is unclear. Good luck to you and your child, and I pray that your relationship continues to be strong and move forward, and that you find the new experiences with your child to be a very enriching one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.